Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be an incredibly short March reading wrap up because I only read one book the entire month of March, and then my quarterly reading stats because we are already a quarter of the way through 2024, which is crazy to think about. So let's just get into it. So the one book that I finished in March was The Lives of Saints by Leigh Bardugo and illustrated by Daniel J. Zollinger. Honestly, I thought I was going to get through this a lot faster than I did, but it's just a collection of stories from the Grishaverse about the saints that people worship. I thought it was going to be like the backstory of how the saints became saints, but in actuality it was kind of like how they became saints, but then also some of them were about how the saints had helped people in this universe, like people that had prayed to them. And yes, Alina was one of them, so of course I was looking forward to that, but they put her at the end of the book, so you kept reading. So because it was short stories, there wasn't anything like keeping me going every single night when I picked it up. So usually I only read 1 or 2 stories a night, and they were only like 3 or 4 pages at most to each story. There were like 17 of them total, I think. But I enjoyed it. It really enhanced the world building for me, especially because I'm still reading books from the Grishaverse, and just gave me a better understanding of like the religious aspect of the Grishaverse. So I enjoyed that. I just wish I had read it faster. I think I gave this 3 stars. And now on to my quarterly reading stats. So my reading goal for this year was to read 20 books in total, because last year my goal was 26 and I was a couple books short. So I was like, if my reading pace this year is anything like last year, it's gonna be like close to 20. So I set my standards for myself to be achievable. So I wanted to read 20 books this year, and I am happy to say that I have already read 18, but unfortunately of the 18 I had to DNF 2 of them. One of them, the writing style just wasn't working for me. The second one, it gave me so much anxiety, and I found the characters super annoying. So instead of pushing myself to read through that, I DNF'd it, which I'm getting more comfortable with DNFing books. Usually it was like in the past it was not something that I would do, because I kept telling myself like, oh, but what if it gets better and you missed out because you didn't finish it? Well, right now I feel like I'm not missing out on much with those 2 books that I DNF'd. So, of the books that I read this year, all of them have been fiction. I'm not really a nonfiction girly. Maybe I'll read some nonfiction later on as like read as an ebook, but they're not something I gravitate to. I read because I want to escape this life. So yeah. And let's see, I read 4,473 pages total, and my average rating was 3.95 out of 5 stars, which, hearing that, makes a lot of sense because I feel like most books I read, I give around 3 stars, but I know of the books I've read so far this year, a lot of them have been great, so that makes sense it's a little bit higher. Of the 18 books that I've read, 4 of them have been ebooks, which I just read on my Kindle app on my phone, and then the other 14 have been physical books. I've given 5-star ratings to 3 books, those being Letters to the Lost by Brigid Kemmerer, Shadow and Bone, and Ruin and Rising, both by Leigh Bardugo, which you're gonna hear Leigh Bardugo a lot in this quarterly reading wrap up, because I think of all the books I've read so far this quarter, most of them have been in the Grishaverse, which I am trying to get through and loving. So that makes a lot of sense to me. 2 I have given 4.5 out of 5 stars. 1 has been given 4 stars, and then 5 of them have been given 3 stars, and 2 I did not rate, and obviously those 2 were the 2 books that I DNF'd. I don't think it's right for me to give a rating to a book that I had not finished, so I just leave them as is. My most read authors so far this year are Leigh Bardugo, coming in with 5 books. Again, I've been getting through the Grishaverse, so of course she's going to be up there at number 1. Number 2 is Christina Lauren. I've read 2 books by them, which again, that makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to get through their back catalog of books, and I love every single one of them. And then the third most read author on here is Faith Erin Hicks. I've read 2 books by her, and she has written the Avatar comics, which I've been reading like in between like the Grishaverse books, so that makes a lot of sense too. Moving on to genres, I've read 12 fantasy books, 12 YA books, 6 romance books, 4 middle grade books, 5 contemporary books, 3 graphic novels, 2 comics. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is between a graphic novel and a comic. I thought it was like if you read like left to right or right to left, but I think that's the difference between like comics and manga. But I'm not a manga reader, so I'm not sure. Comment down below if you know the difference. But I know just looking at the books that are in graphic novel versus comics, they're all of the Avatar comics that I've read, but the 2 that were deemed comics were like compilations of like the Team Avatar tales and then the Lost tales. So, and then the 3 graphic novels were like streamlined stories, so maybe that's the difference. I don't know. 2 of them were LGBTQIA plus novels. 1 was a short story and 1 was historical. And just looking at those stats, it makes a lot of sense for me. In years previous, I would have been surprised at how much fantasy there is on this list. But again, Grishaverse, so a lot of fantasy. YA is the majority of where the books I read come from, although I have been getting more into adult romance novels. So I'm gonna predict that I'm gonna be reading a lot more romance and adult books down the line this year. Middle grade, again, that goes back to the Avatar comics, and I have a feeling I'm going to read a lot more LGBTQIA plus books down the line as well. Now, moving on to moods of the books that I read, I thought that was interesting because I've never described like a book by a mood, really. I never thought about that. I always just thought of it as genre, but that's what Storygraph does. So 13 of the books I read were deemed adventurous, those being Sleeping Beauty No More by Aisha Uruj, which unfortunately I DNF'd, Take Me Home Tonight by Morgan Matson, which I also DNF'd, The Lives of Saints by Leigh Bardugo, Demon in the Wood by Leigh Bardugo and illustrated by Danny Pendergast, Shadow and Bone, Ruin and Rising, Siege and Storm, all by Leigh Bardugo, Radiance by Alison Knoll, Athena's Child by Hannah Lynn, Suki Alone by Faith Erin Hicks, Katara and the Pirate Silver by Faith Erin Hicks, the Team Avatar Tales, and Avatar The Lost Adventures. So again, that's mostly dominated by Leigh Bardugo books. I'm interested to see that if once I finish all of the Grishaverse books that I have, if my reading taste will still lean so heavily towards fantasy, because I don't really consider myself a fantasy reader, like for at least the past 3 years. I hadn't really picked up a fantasy book just because it was so much mental energy that I just did not have to read. So I leaned a lot towards contemporary books and romance books, and that's really how I got into a romance kick. So I'm interested to see what will happen once I finish Grishaverse, if I'll like jump right into the next fantasy series / fantasy novel that was on my list to read, or if I like need to give myself a break and just read something light and fluffy. Well, we'll see. Okay, and then 7 books were deemed lighthearted, and that would be the Team Avatar Tales, the Avatar The Lost Adventures, Katara and the Pirate Silver by Faith Erin Hicks, Radiance by Alison Knoll, You Are Here by Jennifer E. Smith, Kiss Me in New York by Catherine Ryder, Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren, and Take Me Home Tonight by Morgan Matson, which again, that was one of the ones that I DNF'd. 7 were considered emotional. There's a lot of overlap with some of these books, which is kind of funny to me, because I'm like, oh yeah, it's lighthearted and emotional. I can be both. I mean, that's life, right? But those 7 were Sleeping Beauty No More by Aisha Uruj, Letters to the Lost by Bridget Kemner. Yeah, that was super emotional because it deals a lot with grief, but it it was a good hurt, you know, when you just want a book to make you feel something. That's what Letters to the Lost did for me. Then there was Suki Alone by Faith Erin Hicks, Athena's Child by Hannah Lynn, Autobiography by Christina Lauren, You Are Here by Jennifer E. Smith, and Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. Yeah, Ruin and Rising made me sob like a little baby. There is and I even filmed myself crying, which I inserted, I think, in my February reading wrap up. So if you want to see me bawl my eyes out, go watch that video. 5 of them were dark reads, which was the entire Shadow and Bone trilogy, plus Demon in the Wood and The Lives of Saints, all by Leigh Bardugo. 4 were funny, those being Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren, the Team Avatar Tales and the Avatar Lost Adventures, Katara and the Pirate Silver, and Take Me Home Tonight by Morgan Matson. 2 were mysterious, those being Sleeping Beauty No More by Aisha Uruj and Radiance by Alison Knoll, and 2 were hopeful, those being Autobiography by Christina Lauren and Suki Alone by Faith Erin Hicks. And in terms of reading pace, 59% of the books I read were fast-paced, 29% were medium-paced, and 12% were slow-paced. And last but not least, page number-wise, 65% of them were less than 300 pages, and 35% of them were 300 to 499 pages. That is a very specific window for page numbers, but I guess you have to kind of get more specific as you go higher up with page numbers when there's books that are 600 pages or 1,000 pages, but that makes sense to me. Again, why most of them were under 300 pages, because when I see a fat book, I tend to get super intimidated and avoid them. I think that's part of the reason why it took me so long to read the Grishaverse, because they're fat books. But they're super fast paced, and I love that world so much. At this point in my reading year, if I had to choose my favorite book that I've read, it's gonna be split between either Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo or Letters to the Lost by Bridget Kemner. Just for opposite reasons. Obviously, Shadow and Bone, I love the world building that Leigh Bardugo does with that. It's just, I've fallen in love with that world. I would like to visit and become a Grisha, without the war and without the Darkling and all of that. But I have yet to watch the show, because I've been slightly busy watching this little show called Young Royals. It just had its 3rd and final season. I don't know if you guys have seen me talk about that before. Please sense the sarcasm. And Letters to the Lost, it just, like I said, it hurt, but the hurt was so good and it was so emotional. And if a book can make me cry, I feel like that automatically gives it a high rating for me, just because I want to feel something. Don't know what that says about my emotional well-being, but we can unpack that another time. But that is it for this video, guys. Short and sweet. I hope you liked it. If you want to see more of me, you can follow my social medias linked down below. I will also have my Goodreads and Storygraph accounts linked down there as well if you want to follow me there and see what I'm reading in real time. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful morning, noon, night, or day, wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!